Hey there everybody, welcome to Tucktuk's Trinkets and Terrain. This week is a bit of a special video. Andy over at WeGeekTogether reached out to me and asked if I wanted to do a friendly competition with him where he would design and 3D print a piece of terrain and then I would handcraft it in my usual materials, which sounded like a lot of fun. We gave ourselves a week to craft, and then as far as the subject matter goes, we agreed upon using the new Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft book. Specifically, we would each pick a domain of dread to use as our sort of inspiration. For mine, I picked the Borka domain, specifically the Gardens of Evil, which the ruler of that domain uses to create and grow plants that she uses to make poisons and toxins, which sounded like a lot of fun to try and make. So I made a few dungeon tiles here, tried to make them some weird and unique looking plants. I think it turned out pretty good, so I'm going to show you how I built those. But after you watch this video, make sure you head over to WeGeekTogether and watch his video and let us know who you think won. Thanks so much for stopping by. Hope you enjoy.
Alright, the base of this project is going to be these two pentagons that I cut out of some XPS foam. I also cut this little bridge piece just to make it easier to connect these to normal standard square tiles. I'm not going to go into too much depth here with these. It's pretty standard construction. I'm just using a texture roller to give it a cobblestone, and then I'm going to use these leftover bricks from my temple build to create sort of planters and some outer brickwork on these two tiles. For the planters, I'm going to fill them with PVA glue and some sand to give it some ground texture. And then once that was dry, it base coated everything in some Mod Podge and black paint, and then base coated all of the stone with this pewter gray. Dry brushed it all with this lighter gray color, and then just to give it a little bit of uniqueness, I'm going to do my sporadic dry brush with this coral and light blue paint to just give it a little bit of difference from my sort of normal stone look. For the dirt, I'm going to use this burnt umber color as the base coat. After a black wash, I'm going to use the sand gray as my final dry brush over everything. I wasn't too concerned about giving the dirt some detail because it's going to get mostly covered with plants. So I went to the dollar store and picked up a few random plants there. They had these weird fuzzy fruit things, as well as these sort of larger blooming butterflies. They are attached to the plant like plants. I don't know what they were going for here, but they're unique shaped, so I thought I would use them for this project. So after pulling off all of the butterfly flowers, I separated a bunch of these longer sort of grass pieces. I'm just going to cut these down shorter so that they're easier to use for one of my planters. I also cut off a bunch of these little fuzzy bulb things. I really am not sure what they're going for here. You can see the label on this says blooming branches, but not really sure how that works. And then these butterfly ones, I'm just going to trim off the head and the tail to give it closer to a flower look, even though the petals are very distinctly butterfly shaped, which I think kind of makes it look more interesting. I'm going for just some crazy, weird plants. The description in the book describes them as unique and exotic, so that's kind of what I was going for here. So I grabbed some leaves from another dollar store plant that I had lying around, and these are going to be the base of my butterfly flowers. Just using some hot glue to layer on these leaves, sort of alternating to give it sort of a sprouting look. Trimmed off the base of the butterfly, and then again just hot glued that into the center of my leaves. And then next, to finish it off, I have these little berry things, again from a dollar store plant, so I'm just going to cut a clump of those off and then glue that into the center of the flower to give it one last detail. And for these, I'm going to call that good. I ended up making 3 of these total. They're very large, which I really kind of like. It gives the tile more of an overgrown look when it's all finished, which I thought looked really cool. So you can see I've added another leaf clump to these, so they're more full. And then to attach them to the tile, I just used a pencil and created a hole into the sand and just hot glued those in place. And with with that, our first planter is done. So for the second one, I'm going to start off by poking some holes in the dirt again. These are going to house all of the grass pieces that we cut off earlier. I'm just going to put some hot glue into each of the holes and grab a clump of the grass pieces and then just stick that in, going for sort of maybe like reeds or something along those lines. I'm going to glue a bunch of these clumps in, all into this planter, until it's full enough. I didn't want to go overboard. And then I'm going to take my fuzzy fruit flower things and then just hot glue a bunch of these along the base of the grass, sort of like the fruit or whatever it is growing out of the base here. And again, just kept gluing those in until it looked good, looked full enough. I also trimmed off some of the grass blades just to give it more height difference and make it a little more interesting instead of just uniform height across all of them. And that is the second planter all done. For the next one, these are the pink flowers from my Skull Cave video that I hit with a bit of yellow spray paint. It ended up giving this really cool sort of marbly look, which I liked. And again, grabbed a bunch of random leaves from some plants that I had lying around, and I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the purple ones and just layer on some of the flower petals, making sure to offset the petals so they don't all overlap each other. I'm going to attach those the same way in the planter on the other side here. I made 4 of these. They were a little smaller, so I thought I could fit one more in here. Now these looked a little too blank in the center here, so I wanted to find something that I could use to give it a little more interest. And I found these little beads at Michael's. They're almost like a clay material, but they're a little flexible, so you can't break or at least it's more difficult to break the petals, which are pretty thin. And they were around the same color as my flowers here, so I just hot glued those into the center and called it done. For the last planter, I wanted to do something a little different. So I grabbed a whole bunch of floral wire and twisted it up into this gnarled vine-looking thing. After some brown paint and a little bit of a dry brush with a coral color that I used earlier, I hot glued that in after dry fitting it to make sure it fit nicely. And then on that same bead strand that I got for the yellow flowers were these larger beads with a couple different colors. And I thought those would look pretty nice, so I just hot glued those onto the vine. Now obviously you can see the hot glue and the holes of the beads, so I wanted to cover that up. So I grabbed a little bit of this yellow static grass and mixed in a bit of this lime green paint and some PVA glue. And I hated it immediately. It was way too bright of a green, so I tried to tone it down with a little bit of brown paint, which of course made it just brown. I mixed in way too much paint. But it was pretty late at this point, and I didn't want to keep messing with it, so I just went with it. I used this little tool to grab as little bit of the flocking as I could, and just spread that onto the vine, using it to cover up the hot glue and the bead holes, and just give it some more texture. I'm least happy with this planter. I really should go in and dry brush all of the grass to make it stand out more. But overall, I think it looks good when you see it with the others. You can see here's the finished version with all planters full. Now for the other tile, I wanted to make a sort of central feature tree almost. So using some floral wire, I twisted them together to make an armature and just separated all the pieces to create a branch system. This is my first time making a tree like this, and I think it turned out pretty well, in all honesty. I'm very happy with the result. After I twisted together all of the wire into a shape that I liked, I used some hot glue to secure it all together, stiffen it up. This floral wire is very thin and flexible, so the hot glue stiffens it up, makes it a little less prone to bending. After a black base coat, I painted all of the branches in this brown, and then I dry brushed it all with this canary yellow. You can also see that I used the hot glue to add these odd knobs, and I just hit those with the full strength of the yellow paint. I then washed everything with some Agrax Earthshade and set that aside to dry. So this is polyfill. You use this when you fill like pillows and stuffed animals and things like that. But I took a bunch of it and sprayed it with this sort of navy blue spray paint. This is what I'm going to use for the canopy. After applying a bunch of PVA glue to my branches, you can see I sort of hollowed out the middle of the polyfill here and just pushed that into place. And it immediately became apparent that I used way too much polyfill. So after pulling a bunch off, shaping it, messing with it, you know, making it to a shape that I liked, I ended with this sort of flat-topped tree that I really like the shape of. But you can see most of the paint got pulled away, so I re-hit it with the same spray paint, and this is the final result. You can see the branches also got hit with the spray paint, which I kind of liked how maybe it's implying that the branches are slowly getting thinner and thinner, and also turning bluer and bluer as it goes upwards. Now, in the book of the description of the Gardens of Evil, it specifically says that the ruler, or the caretaker of these gardens, is very proud of them. So I thought it would be neat to add some sort of decorations onto the tree here, sort of like wind chimes and things like that. So I grabbed a couple of these spherical beads and just tied those on with some simple twine. And then I'm just going to attach that to the base, like all my other plants. And unfortunately I didn't film it, but I do fill up this planter with some flowers and flocking to fill it out and give it some more color. You'll see that in the final shot at the end of the video. So next up, I wanted to make some sort of alchemy tables and prep stations and things like that. So after cutting a bunch of popsicle sticks and gluing them together, I made 2 small tables, a larger table, and then I also used these random wood bits to create sort of places that the caretaker of these gardens would store the materials used in the poison and toxin making. So I painted these tables up just a brown, and then I dry brushed it in with a dark orange, gave it a wash, and then dry brushed it again with a light gray. I then set about decorating them. So for one of the small tables, I grabbed one of those fuzzy fruit looking things and sliced it up, and trying to give the idea that this is a work in progress. So I glued those bits onto the table. I also glued this little Warhammer dagger next to it. And then for good measure, I also glued on some of those red berry things from the large purple flowers, trying to connect the table here to the tiles so that it's all one cohesive sort of dungeon that you can use together. So that table is done. For the other small table, I just thought that this might be like a storage place for all the completed poisons and toxins. So just gluing some random beads down, some of those different shapes that I used in my Yawning Portal build for the bar and all the beverages there, and then just used my little tiny beads as the tops of all the bottles. Nice and simple, didn't want to be too complicated with this one. Now for the larger table, I wanted to add some candles, and I wanted to try and create a candle holder. So this is a thumbtack or a push pin that I cut off the pin part, and then using a small ring so that the push pin will sit flat since it's got that curved top. Just use some tacky glue and glue that into place onto the larger table. I then grabbed some of the candles that were left over from my last video and glued those right on top and made this nice little candle holder. Glued on another one of these fuzzy fruit things, again just to connect all these tables together. I then wanted to make sort of an alchemy looking device, so using this larger bead and this little, I guess you'd call it like a gear, made 2 of those, one larger and one smaller. You can also see that the smaller one is clear. My idea here was that something is being distilled from the larger sort of cloudy one and being funneled into the clearer one. I then glued a candle underneath this so that the whatever liquid is being transferred is being heated up. And then to create the sort of generic tube spiral thing that connects the 2 containers, this is actually some solder that we use in like electronics. It's very flexible, so definitely don't want to hit this on accident. I didn't have any thicker gauge wire that was stiff, but this works. It gets the impression across, and I think it looks good. And then for my couple of ingredient holders, I just used some PVA glue and just sprinkled in some random flocking. I think one of them is oregano, and then this one is sort of my mixed bag of leftover static grasses and things that I collect after using them. So this is just a mixed bag. And with that, let's get to all of the final shots. So you can see I've added a little bit more detail to these, some sort of ground cover and things, as well as some blood pools. I wanted to give more of an impression of, the evil aspect of this, thinking that these gardens are fertilized with the people who the poisons are used on, so that's kind of what I was going for. You can see underneath one of the large purple flowers, I have a sort of a corpse or zombie hand painted up. That's a nice little thing for players to find. You can see I also glued on a couple skulls in random spots. And for the tree, I did the same thing. You can see all the flowers that I put on underneath, as well as the drag mark of blood going to the corpse that you can just make out at the base of the tree. Again, just going for give them a little more spooky, evil vibes. And then here is all of the tables and collected materials. You can see I've painted up the candles and added a few skulls in a couple different spots. I really like this setup. It really works together as one sort of cohesive lab setup that I can use in other places. If you did like the video, I really would appreciate if you hit the subscribe and the like buttons. It would mean a lot to me and really help grow the channel. And then make sure you head on over to WeGeekTogether's video and check out what he made. Make sure you subscribe and like his video as well, and then leave a comment of who you think won. It's just a friendly competition that we wanted to do, so nothing's at stake, but just make sure you let us know who won handcrafted versus 3D printed. Here's a little bit of a sneak peek at what Andy made. It looks super awesome. I'm very impressed. It's an awesome sort of mad scientist laboratory looking thing. So make sure you head on over to his channel, check that out. But more than anything, thank you so much for stopping by. Hope to see you next time.